Hello and welcome to another week's episode of my Trippl3 Cybersecurity Roundup. My name is Clinton Walker. And in this week's episode, I'll be covering 3 breaches, 3 countermeasures, and 3 takeaways for your C-suite and business owners alike. Now, Booking.com is my breach, the first breach I'll be covering. Now, Booking.com has disclosed a breach saying that their systems have been compromised through the exposure of a compromised system which is linked to a third party. So that probably could be some API connection or some integration of some downstream systems. It's not so clear as yet as to what that particular downstream system or third party system is. However, the data that's involved included customer data, booking details, and contact information for all those people who are booking and using their platform. The impact here for this particular one is huge because they're a global brand with global reach and their system is very complex. Customer trust is a big impact there in terms of reputational damage, etc. The risk of fraud, so people could actually, the attacker could also impersonate real bookers and pretend to be others that they're not, and also conduct phishing attack on those customers because they've got their contact information such as their email, telephone details, and all the address details relating to that particular person that's booking on their system. Now, what are some of the countermeasures that could be implemented here if they were not in place, which I'm sure for a company of this size, they may have some controls in place. However, if you're a similar business, one thing that you need to pay attention to in terms of countermeasures around multi-factor authentication. This is a key theme that keeps popping up over and over again in terms of how they access or users access the system. So it's something you know, something you have, something you are. And I'll cover another episode as it relates to multi-factor authentication. Restrict access to reservation data in terms of role specific to the parts of the businesses that actually deals with reservations and the overall customer journey for those people who are booking their tickets or booking via that system. Use what's called DLP, data loss prevention. So that's a tool that you can use to configure across different data sets or different systems to notify you and prevent the exfiltration or the movement of large sets of data from systems outside that goes outside of a network. Review third parties, and third party and supply chain risk is a huge risk at the moment and it continues to grow. Make sure that you conduct due diligence regularly on third parties and make sure whatever integration that you're integrating with the main system within your business, you properly conduct vetting across those systems around cybersecurity, compliance, and data management. The other well-known brand that I want to talk about as well is McGraw Hill. Now, McGraw Hill, again, is another big brand, and it is said that they've been breached based on a previous breach of Salesforce. So they've been using Salesforce. As some of you may know, Salesforce have been breached a couple of times in the last year. So the attackers used those previously breached data and credentials that they stole to actually conduct what we call downstream system and downstream hacking or compromise of other systems and people. So they've used the previous data that they've compromised with Salesforce, use this against the clients of Salesforce, which is in this case is McGraw Hill. Now, the main thing that they said that actually initiated that was a misconfiguration and over permission. So somebody within the business had too much permission for the role that they were doing. And the importance of that as well is that make sure that people who are working for you only have the right access for the role that they're actually performing. And it's a case of least privileges as well. I'll come back to that in the countermeasures. But what amount of data was breached in this particular breach? 13.5 million. 13.5 million accounts were affected, and it is said that names, address, telephone numbers, and related records were also compromised in that particular attack. Now, what are some of the impacts here as it relates to this particular brand and the breach and people who are in similar space? Again, reputational damage, time consuming. They're going to take a lot of time to do any remedial actions because it's so widespread across huge ecosystems and across the world that it will take time to identify, isolate, and also manage the breach remediation process. They may also be susceptible to what's called breach notification, and that is they've got a limited time or time frame of when the breach occurred to notify regulators and relevant authorities that they need to comply with in that situation. And again, downstream issues around potential breaches for the customers of McGraw is also in focus as well. So what are some of the countermeasures? Multi-factor authentication, regularly audit integrations, and make sure that the tokens that are being used are rotated on a regular basis. Validate cloud services and cloud security posture on a regular basis, especially when you're integrating something like Salesforce or similar tools. Conduct regular penetration testing to identify some of the issues that the attacker could actually see before they actually compromise your system. And conduct regular ongoing or what we call continuous monitoring of your attack surface. That is of all the entities and touch points that are internet facing, so you can actually see and have some idea of what your exposure is. The final breach I want to cover is one that is linked to a particular state. In this case, is Russia. It is said that they were involved in a campaign attack that tried to compromise a particular router, which is called TP-Link. TP-Link is a very popular, basic, low-level router system, and apparently the data involved there included the traffic data, users data, user activities across different platforms. So addresses were compromised, and over 18,000 credentials and accounts were compromised across 180 countries. The impact here again is account takeover, because once they've compromised your account and their credentials, they can easily log into your account, change your credentials, change your password, and you're now locked out of your system as well. They did this by actually rerouting users to a compromised website or a spoof website that they control. So when you go to that website and assume that you're logging in or using that legitimate website, it's actually harvesting your data in the background rather than the legitimate website that you're thinking that you're actually logging into. Countermeasures for this particular one is as a company, because most individuals wouldn't have this level of access or understand the technicalities, monitor DNS traffic for redirection anomalies, use phishing resistant MFA, and that really look at conditional access, location access for where people are logging in from and where they're using these devices. Maintain asset visibility over routers, firewalls, and make sure that those routers and their firmware are kept up to date at all times. Now that's the update for those three. But what about what companies can do with business owners and stakeholders? Well, the key theme here is around multi-factor authentication, credentials management, and third-party and supply chain risk. So make sure that you monitor and do due diligence on your third parties. Make sure that you conduct regular review on all those APIs that you're integrating within your systems, and strengthen and implement MFA, multi-factor authentication, on all endpoints and user interface where they're logging in to access resources. Now that's the update for this week. Please follow us on LinkedIn, subscribe to us on YouTube, and visit our website for more information on all things cybersecurity, supply chain, and mergers and acquisition. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week. Bye.